Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We have a lot of news, so whether you're joining us from the radio, the TV side, podcast, or live streams, we're thrilled that you are here. But without further ado, after a series of strikes last week and then over the weekend, we'll get into some of those particulars, the President of the United States announced today that the United States is just going to be taking the Strait of Hormuz. That because Iran was not going to back down off of the tolling, because the United States Navy was tired of dealing with this, that, and the other after some of the demining efforts had been kind of sidelined, and after a lot of missiles have been thrown over the Strait of Hormuz, the President of the United States announced today, and he did a lot of media today before heading into this one. Here was the President, I believe, talking to the Fox and Friends crew. Here's President Trump.
It was all done, and then they broke up that deal immediately.
To clarify, sorry, not this one for the Fox and Friends crew. This is the press conference he held this afternoon.
Because they found out there was something in the deal they didn't like, and they're wired differently, and we're not going to put up with it. We are just going forward. We're attacking them tonight. We're taking out all of their capability for anything having to do with the Strait, with the Hormuz Strait. And I think in the end, we will end up just controlling the whole thing. And what they're doing is being very foolish, very stupid.
He says at the end, we'll just end up controlling the whole thing. And then he talks about how stupid and foolish they are, that kind of a thing. President Trump also, in regard to what the United States might get out of this, of course, the president had talked over the weekend about perhaps a 20% tariff on all trade that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. And by the way, this is within his presidential power to do so. This has been explicitly stated by the Supreme Court of the United States regarding tariffs. The president is allowed to enact international embargoes that the United States then charges duties on as certain goods travel through that to our allies. For example, in the same way that if we had blockaded France and the United Kingdom still wanted to trade with France, we could charge a tariff for the British to trade through the ports at Calais, for example. Now, the President of the United States also made it clear that the Gulf states would be getting involved with this. Not perhaps what you might think, but here's the President again.
The Middle East probably would no longer be with us, because you saw they sent missiles to 5 different countries that never even knew they were involved.
Those 5 countries the President is citing over the weekend at the end of last week, by the way, are Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and Kuwait. Now, Saudi Arabia and the UAE are very important to this, although Saudi Arabia is not in that list. And there's a story developing in which the UAE has now claimed the Iranians have killed 2 of their civilian sailors after striking 2 tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. We'll get to that in a second, though. The President of the United States moving to a possible plan of reimbursement from the Gulf allies.
Because they're stone cold crazy. They are crazy. And we're not going to put it up. Yeah, I want to be reimbursed because we're protecting a very rich portion of the world. We're spending money. And so what we've done is we are going to be reimbursed for protection. We're protecting by the countries that we're helping. For instance, you look at the 5 countries. You have Saudi Arabia. You have UAE. You have Qatar, or Qatar as I always say. You have Qatar, Bahrain. And by the way, you have others. You have Kuwait and you have others. And they will do very well. But we think it's appropriate that we don't need them. You know, we have more oil than any other country in the world. When you add Venezuela, which has been amazing, which has tremendous amounts of oil that we control. When you add Venezuela and everything else, we have more than 50% of the world's supply. We don't need it. But we need it from the standpoint of protecting allies, et cetera, including Israel, including Saudi Arabia, including Qatar, including UAE. We're protecting all of them.
So he claims that they are going to provide some kind of reimbursement to the United States. It will be interesting to see how the stock market will respond to this tomorrow. Now, we need to move into some of the updates over the last couple of hours. So according to U.S. Central Command, so the president said we are going to be hitting Iran very, very hard today and tomorrow. He's just lining it up that we're going to be striking Iran, taking the Strait of Hormuz. Central Command announced, quote, at 4:45 p.m. Eastern today, U.S. Central Command began launching the 3rd consecutive night of strikes against Iran at the commander-in-chief's direction. These strikes will continue imposing a heavy cost on Iranian forces and degrade their ability to attack innocent civilians and commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. There was an idea that was floated back in the initial section of the Iranian conflict, in the Second Gulf War, perhaps, in which the United States Navy might be the guarantor of various commercial shipping activities in the strait, but it would require the Navy actually sailing up the strait and seizing perhaps a couple of islands in order to effectuate outposting so that the Iranians don't have a clear shot to any of the shipping vessels. Now, as of this evening, we do have to make this clear. At the present time, Iranian anti-ship cruise missiles are being launched toward commercial vessels off the coast of Abu Dhabi, that's the United Arab Emirates, and there are several explosions reported, but it is not quite clear whether or not any of those particular strikes at Abu Dhabi have landed or they have been intercepted. Now, going in order here, at 5:45 Eastern, there was a couple of explosions reported on the site of Konorak, that is a city along the Strait of Hormuz, closer to the border of Pakistan. The United States traditionally hadn't hit as many targets closer to Pakistan, and that is now no longer the case. The United States is striking. I believe we actually have that footage lined up and ready to go here. So, very large strikes. And we have some information on what some of those strikes might entail, not just your average air-to-ground missile barrages. Some MLRS batteries, United States long-range artillery, are participating in a couple of strikes from Bahrain. So U.S. bases in the UAE as well as Bahrain are active, and they are launching long-range artillery strikes. You can see on the footage here, if you're on the radio, obviously you're probably not going to get a good view for this, but you can see on the video rockets leaving the U.S. MLRS systems and are engaging secondary boosters as they head up the atmosphere towards Iranian targets. Now, another report suggests that not only ATA CMS ballistic missiles conducted by U.S. ground-based HIMARS and MLRS crews from Bahrain to Iran, but also there are a couple of islands that have previously not seen direct strikes that are now being struck. So these screenshots, these pictures are of Kish Island. Kish Island is rather small. It is in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz. Now previously it was called a tourist attraction, kind of a tourist destination. Not so. Now this is west of that tight point of the Keshem Island and the small piece of Oman bordering the UAE in the Strait of Hormuz. But some of these strikes suggest that the United States could, and we know, of course, that the blockade has now been reimposed, could suggest that the United States is preparing to move in and either occupy one or several islands or allow other countries to bring in forces and occupy several islands. And the reason that I bring that up is that now we have confirmation of a couple of more incidents. At 5:55 p.m., it was confirmed explosions on Keshem Island, Kish Island, the Abu Musa Islands, and in Bandar Abbas. That's Iran's premier port city along the Strait of Hormuz. And we saw something that was rather unusual about 1 hour ago exactly, 6:15 p.m. Eastern. Tehran, and I have to put a little bit of an asterisk there, but Tehran confirmed it was attempting to retaliate with ballistic missiles in the middle of the strike. This is very unusual. Iran does not normally retaliate until the strike is ended. The thing is, the strikes do not appear to be ending at all. And as we continue to watch some of these developments, it's clear that the Iranians are trying to do whatever it is that they can, not only to maintain lines of communication, not only to try to reach fractured portions of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps along the Strait of Hormuz, which are now breaking into separate groups, and they're not listening to the parliament, they're not listening to the foreign minister. Muqtada Khamenei is nowhere to be seen. He's not exactly up on 2 feet or even 1 foot and a peg leg. So it's not clear at this point who those particular ballistic missile launches were toward. Over the weekend, they did attempt to hit Kuwait, Bahrain, one Iranian flight, which attempted to land in Yemen, possibly in support of the Houthis. The Saudi Arabians got in on this one. We actually have footage of the Saudis striking a Yemeni airport in order to prevent the Iranians from perhaps escaping to the Houthis in Yemen. So Saudi Arabia has begun firing a series of airstrikes towards Yemen to the Houthis. So that balding, sweating man that you see over from some affiliate state media is pointing out that the airport is being made rather bumpy, and planes don't exactly have all-terrain tires. Radio crew, we know you have to head to the commercial before I get fined. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We're going to continue on the live stream. We'll see y'all in a second. Well, they'll hear us, I guess, because they're on the radio, kind of aside. So, on to more of the news here. The President of the United States also talked a little bit more about some of the other possible objectives in the next couple of days. One of the sites that has made the news over the weekend is called Pickaxe Mountain. Now, I was rather confused. I spend a fair bit of time studying this region. Pickaxe Mountain, up until about a week and a half ago, wasn't really a term that I was super familiar with. It's one of the bunkers around Natanz. We have talked about Natanz. It's one of the nuclear sites that was partially struck by the United States. President Trump on with Hugh Hewitt today. Highly recommend his show. President Trump explained in a little bit of more detail here about whether the United States was going to engage in another series of bunker buster attacks against any of the Iranian nuclear bunkers that might have not yet been turned to dust. This would be the last of the four.
You have obliterated 3 of their nuclear sites, but they got a 4th site maybe at Pickaxe Mountain.
Yeah.
Before you enter into another deal, will you insist that IAEA inspectors get down into that deep, deep, deep tunnel and find out if they got a doomsday machine down there?
Absolutely. They don't have it because we have eyes, with Space Force and everything else. We have a lot of eyes on it. But Pickaxe is a possible target for a nice big fat shot right into the front door. And I think that
Whenever Trump starts talking about that, it is because Secretary of War Pete Hegseth told him he could make something go boom. What's my evidence for that? Whenever President Trump is not really sold on a particular military maneuver, he doesn't usually describe it in the way that he describes whenever he's already gloating over something that he knows is done. So, for example, you'll remember when President Trump ordered the killing of Qasem Soleimani of the Iranian regime back during his first administration. He said he died like a dog. They had to send the dogs down there to look for him because he's in a lot of different pieces. The last thing that went through his head was probably his ass. That's how the President of the United States talks about the United States military being, the greatest fighting force on the history of the world stage. That's the same language he's using here. Again, I don't like to do psychological analysis. I don't like 4D chess, but I think that this is a pretty well distinguished pattern at this point that we can at least point to it.
Maybe you'll see that. I'll tell them right now. Look, the fact is they have no Air Force, they have no Navy, they have no nothing. All they do is talk, and they have fake press. They do very well with the fake press. But
yes, they do.
Because the fake news wants us to lose. It's not even. I mean, the New York Times, they actually said a week ago. Can't imagine they say it now, but think of it. They have no Navy, have no Air Force, have no anything. They have no military. They have nothing. And the Times said, and their inflation, by the way, just hit 301% from 5%. They said, oh, they're in better shape now than they were 4 months ago before I started.
Yeah.
All right, so that brings us, we'll get to Mamdani in New York here in just a little bit. There is plenty to talk about, and I want to get you up to speed on what's going on currently in the Strait of Hormuz first. So to make this very clear, the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Defense has announced, quote, that the national tankers, those would be UAE flagged tankers, Mombasa and Bahia, were targeted by 2 Iranian cruise missiles in the southern passage of the Strait of Hormuz in Omani territorial waters. So Omani meaning, again, there's the UAE, and then there's this little tip right at the edge of the Strait of Hormuz that Oman controls. To be clear, the UAE should just take it, or the United States should take it. There is no reason that Oman should be allowed to control that piece of the land when they are not being of any assistance, not exactly doing anything economically beneficial to the region either way. You're going to see some carving and some changing of borders. Now, I don't mean that flags are going to get real arrowy on the map in the history book section. What I do mean is that you're going to see some territorial moves changing. probably at the request of Saudi Arabia over the next couple of months. Anywho, back to the Minister of Defense from the UAE, quote, "The targeting by Iran resulted in the death of one crew member of the tanker of the Mombasa of Indian nationality and the injury of 8 others." Okay, so they're saying that it is 1 killed and 8 injured, not 2 killed, including 4 serious injuries. The targeting also caused material damage to 2 tankers as a result of fires breaking out on board. Radio crew, welcome back. Glad that you can join us. The Iranians have now killed I see where it is. They have killed 2 sailors from the UAE. 8 are listed injured. There is another individual that is apparently been killed in Iranian strikes toward a tanker in the last week. The Ministry of Defense, quote, "condemns this brazen attack, which constitutes a serious violation and a clear branch of international law, threatening its security and stability in the region." Okay. Here's the part that matters, because this is a violation doesn't. Quote, "It," meaning the UAE, "emphasizes that the state reserves its full right to respond to this escalation and to take all necessary measures to protect its territories, people, and residents, thereby ensuring the preservation of its sovereignty, security, and stability, safeguarding its interests and national capabilities." So we're tracking a number of additional strikes that may be underway in the Strait of Hormuz, as the United States has now announced that it is likely going to be controlling it until further notice, and charging a 20% tariff. Now, Foreign Minister Arachi in Iran had initially came out and gloated and said that it was a good thing that Trump said that he wanted to charge a 20% tariff because you should be able to charge a tariff on the Strait of Hormuz, but that he was the better deal because he would only charge 1% or 2%, which is a bit curious given that the foreign minister's office, the parliament's office, is unable to contact and engage in the giving explicit orders to those IRGC units along the Strait of Hormuz. There's no evidence that suggests that the Iranians are actually communicating with Keshem Island. Now, one of the radio sites in which Iran was attempting to communicate via high-frequency radio with several of the tankers passing the Strait of Hormuz that we've given you clips from over the last couple of weeks, those apparently were some of the wave of airstrikes, or the target of those airstrikes. Also, coastal surveillance systems, drone and missile capabilities, according to one U.S. official speaking to CNN. There appear to be a couple, I want to make sure I get this right. There appear to be a couple of high-profile flights currently happening over Iran via the United States. I want to make sure this is completely clear. Yes, and the UK Maritime Trade Operations Organization is also stating, basically, stay away from the Strait of Hormuz, which is essentially a day ending and why at this point. Now, the president was asked if Cuba had Iranian drones, and this is being treated as something that is very serious, as though President Trump is about to invade Cuba. President Trump simply said, if Cuba has Iranian drones, we'll take care of it. That's basically all he said. I don't really see there to be a lot of other news there or a lot of other intelligence suggesting that Cuba is preparing the fleet of Shahed suicide drones. Now, of note, there do not appear to be a lot of Iranian suicide drones that are currently in the air. That's also something that should be noted. There are no organizations right now that I'm aware of through my means of getting news updates, or even some of the gutter open source intelligence accounts, which are about as trustworthy as Flint tap water. I'm not seeing a number of particularly interesting or verifiable citations of Iranian drones which are being launched. I'm only seeing reports of ballistic missiles. Now, again, later this evening, if Iran chooses then to launch some of their drones, we might see, some of those strikes. It isn't clear that the Shahed drones have actually hit anything specifically in the meantime. I've also gotten a request from the comment section that I think I would be remiss if I didn't cite this. Someone asked, how is the pizza traffic over at the Pentagon? The old meme that whenever there's big doings going on the global stage, that all of the pizza places around the Pentagon are very busy. I'll answer it this way. The second closest Papa John's is reporting very, very, very heavy traffic. All of the other pizza place has abnormally low traffic. I know that some of you guys care for that, so I just thought I would share that briefly. We don't have any information on further strikes from the Saudi Arabians right now, but we do have an understanding that they have issued a ground stop to several regions in Saudi Arabia, which is very interesting. One reporter did ask President Trump today whether or not it was time for the Iranians to go back to the streets, and President Trump responded, quote, "They can't do that. They don't have guns," end quote. Now, there are still border skirmishes which are flaring up and have not settled down. The Iranians have, since February, been unable to dispatch enough of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to its far eastern regions near Turkmenistan and Pakistan to deal with some of the ethnic tension that they were always trying to kind of keep their hand on the pressure cooker lid over. Those are still flaring up ever since the funeral and the burial of Al-Khamenei. There have been additional ethnic flare-ups on the border, which is very exciting to Turkmenistan, who's never quite gotten over the issues that they've had even when the Soviets were in charge of the stands. That said, in the western regions of the country, there is an abnormally low amount of traffic on the radio and the communication side, especially in Iraq. And there really has been a lower amount of traffic since the Iraqi prime minister said he wasn't really sure what the future of Iraq inside OPEC was. So again, I'm not going to try to do too much tea leaf reading with you guys. I'm just kind of giving you all of the news that I have as we're trying to keep an eye on the United States and its ongoing attacks. Now, the United States is no longer just using airborne drones. It is also using unmanned craft on the water. CENTCOM released this footage from over the weekend of the United States using an autonomous naval vessel to strike a submarine repair facility along the Strait of Hormuz that they being the Iranians had attempted to get back up and running during the MOU period. You can see that craft. There's no one that is driving that boat except a guy with a very nice remote controller on a 24-inch screen, probably back at Creech outside of Las Vegas. So this guy is going for it. And if you can just picture the episode 6 in Star Wars, when the A-Wing is losing control and flying into the bridge of the Star Destroyer, that's what's going on here. You can't exactly say shields up. Here's the dash cam. Oh, that's awesome. And then explosions, kaboom. Now that's a drive-by you won't forget. Exceeding port speed, but there's no longer a port. The United States doing some excellent work. Now, I've seen a couple of questions come in about the AI-powered drones that supposedly Russia is developing and Ukraine is developing and the United States is developing, all these various airborne AI-related drones. There are some test flights going on at the present time. There are no strike packages which are currently being assigned in the Russo-Ukrainian conflict or here with the Second Gulf War, if you want to call it that, in which the United States is using actual armed packages on AI-assisted drones. And it's because there's still a lot of electronic interference. We're going to be keeping a pretty close eye on this over the evening. I did want a chance to talk a little bit about the U.S. Congressman Representative Ro Khanna and his theater over in the West Bank outside of Israel. We're going to get into that. Radio crew, I know you guys have a commercial break you're just dying to get to. We're going to break down some more of this news. A lot of stuff tonight. Thanks for joining us. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right. Now, in the meantime, we do have some interesting information regarding some big theater. There are a lot of people right now that are trying to get all of the political stunts that they can to get as much camera time as they can before the 2028 presidential election cycle. They're trying to do whatever they can as well to signal to the Democratic Socialists of America crew that they are one of them, that they should be accepted and appreciated. One of these individuals is Ro Khanna, who went over to the West Bank near Nazareth and entered a restricted military area and was then stopped by the Israeli Defense Force, who got out and on their backs was slung M4s, the M4 carbine, and this freaked Ro Khanna out. And so he posted this very, very emotional series of tweets. Israeli settlers brandishing American-made M4s detained me and other Americans on my trip to Palestine. Hold on, gotta clutch the pearls here. When the IDF arrived, They sided with the settlers and continued our detention. They made a huge mistake. You will be hearing more soon. And then he hit all of the media. So what actually happened here, the best that we can ascertain, he entered a restricted military area. No one brandished a weapon at him. We have the footage from several different angles. And all of those pearls Ro Khanna was clutching, pretty much for nothing, because he chose not to coordinate. There's just random vehicles driving around an area where there is routinely terrorist activity. It's not as though they called and said, hey, I'm an American congressman, and this is my group of Americans, and we're going to be moving around the area documenting things. No, it was called in. The IDF went out, and they weren't detained ad infinitum ad nauseum. That's not what happened. So I want to move into a couple of these things a little bit sooner. Ro Khanna got out there and gave the whole, I'm safe, thank you so much for asking questions. I was so scared.
Hi, I'm home safely, and I just wanted to thank everyone who reached out. Honestly, it's still quite raw, and I'm still processing things.
It's still quite raw. Oh, no. It's terrible. I happened the last time that I was over in the Middle East, I visited the UNIFIL checkpoint between Israel and Lebanon that the United Nations was running. And guess what? Weapons were not only drawn, they were pointed at us until they ascertained we weren't terrorists. We got out of the vehicle, we showed our identification, and still they had the weapons drawn at battle ready across the chests the entire time that they were there. All of the photos and video of Ro Khanna, they weren't like going all arms in tactical, held up at gunpoint by Captain Bryce and Soap. That's not what's happening here.
Replaying the images of the armed settlers who detained us and the
his entire really
IDF soldiers
retarded light flashing before his eyes.
Our van.
Oh,
It was quite scary. But I also have just been thinking about all the Palestinians I met and their stories. They don't have the platform I do.
Yeah. I'm just going to share and to show. That goes on for another 2.5 minutes. And to prevent you from stabbing scissors into your ears, I will show you a little bit more here. He does several pre-prepared videos for these things. What happened to me in the West Bank was an outrage. But nothing compared to what Palestinians face every day. It's time to share their story. So again, it's the very basic alliance nonsense. I'm not exactly sure what this is going to do for the midterms, but best of luck to you. Best of luck to you with this. I don't believe it's going to be as effective as he believes, because people at home, they have receipts. All right. I believe the radio crew is now back with us from their commercial break. How do you know that all of this is done? How do you know that all of this is popping? Well, because he comes home and then Ro Khanna gets fact-checked right on Fox immediately.
Did you really not know that going into a restricted military area guarded by local security forces was going to result in your entourage getting stopped?
It was not an area that was restricted by military. American Congress people had been there before. We went with
This is the same ICE thing, because we're going to get to this with Maine here in a minute. Oh, Congress people have been there before. I am a member of Congress, and I am allowed to go anywhere, everywhere, all the time.
Prior coordination,
The Fox host points out accurately, with prior coordination. By the way, I've done some of the checking, including with the staffers of Democratic congressmen and women. When they coordinate with the associative governments of both the West Bank and with Israel, they will be allowed and made very clear and safe. You know what would really not be good? Ro Khanna getting shot. Why? Because he's a U.S. congressman. The idea that you as a congressman is like, I'm going to go here and I'm going to do what I want. You go, girl. No, you're a congressperson. We really do not want to see your blood spilled on foreign soil. That's not exactly a thing that Americans are looking for. And do I like Ro Khanna? No, I don't want to see, again, because of his stupidity, to go posture before the world. And what is this really about? You know what it's about. It's all about race baiting. So again, Hassan Piker has him on because you got to do his little pity tour. And he says, you know what? Hassan Piker says, I don't know if you know this, Ro Khanna, but you're brown. Incredible. Groundbreaking stuff here in the midterm year.
You're a brown man in America.
Oh, you thought I was joking? No, really. You're a brown man, says Hassan Piker. Incredible.
man in America. It's not like America has been all too kind to brown folk. You're from Pennsylvania, and you're saying that this was a different kind.
I want to roll that back. Hassan Piker says you're a brown man in America, and then says America has not been all too kind to your people, to your color, whatever. Ro Khanna's net worth, his median net worth, is estimated at approximately $232.7 million. He is one of the wealthiest members in Congress. I'm so tired of that. Michelle Obama comes out like, no one ever lets black women complain. I have it really tough. She was the first lady of the United States. Kamala Harris, no one wanted me because I'm a black woman. She was not only the nominee to be the president of the United States, she was the attorney general of California and then the senator for California. Oh, the horror. You're a brown man. You probably have it so terrible, says former fat little rich boy Hassan Piker.
That I believe you said something along the lines of you had never recognized your skin color as much as you did when you were traveling through the West Bank.
I've never felt my race as much as I did in the 3 days I was in the West Bank. Never.
Why? I thought the United States was the most racist place in the entire world. You're saying I never felt my race. What race? I'm sorry. Isn't Ro Khanna like? Isn't he like Indian ethnically? What do you mean felt his race? What did he stop for curry? What are you talking about?
You know, when I grew up in Pennsylvania in Bucks County.
He stopped for Pennsylvania. He grew up in Pennsylvania. How many Amish bakeries are there in the West Bank? What are you talking about?
It was a middle class upbringing.
Middle class upbringing. Yes. I love it so much. So he's being relentlessly mocked for that. And this is him trying to kind of claim the stage because the socialists here at home are also going through it. So Zohran Mamdani is also getting roasted here in the United States because Morris Katz, the campaign head for Graham Platner, who not only worked to cover up Graham Platner's various and extensive sexual assault scandals and all of the other kinds of scandals, but Morris Katz also has sexual misconduct scandals of his own from previous, I believe, Summer Lee's campaign that he worked on. It was kicked off because, again, he's got his own scandals. And people said, wait a minute. Aren't you still like a senior advisor to Zohran Mamdani? Again, he's a socialist. So again, Mr. Zohran Mamdani, who called on Graham Platner to step aside, is he actually going to get rid of some of these people with their own sexual assault scandals? And the reporter asks that question, and then we've seen this with the reporters to Zohran before. They then have to ask like a fun question. So they ask a serious one. They're like, also, do you think the World Cup is fun, Zohran?
I wanted to ask you, Mr. Mayor, last week, members of the DSA sent out a public letter to campaigns and officials to stop working with Morris Katz. Are you still planning to work with him? Also, this...
Just answer that question. There you go. Let him answer. But we got to have an also in there.
Sunday is the FIFA World Cup final. I know you're very invested. President Donald Trump is expected to be there. Do you plan to sit with him, talk with him? Those are my questions. Thanks.
I will continue to work with Morris Katz. He remains a top advisor of mine.
Yeah, sure. I mean, who knows? Who cares? Again, whether or not he is responsible for the putrid, festering corpse of a campaign from Graham Platner, of whom everyone is now trying to run and take a piece of. And of course, the ice shooting new Summer of Love Northeast edition is not going to make it. I mean, it's going to be much, much worse with the individuals already acting as you would expect. But making it clear, hey, I don't care what he did or what he does or who he grabs. He's my campaign advisor. After all, his track record is stellar. Yikes.
And for Sunday's final, my focus will be on the game. And I anticipate just watching for 90 or 120 or maybe even penalties as well.
Okay, that's real special. Thank you very much. Now, Zohran Mamdani is also in hot water for a couple of other reasons. Crime is turning out not to be so low, like Zohran promised all of his social workers. There happen to be a lot of sexual assaults that are happening in New York City and have not gone down. The occurrence of which have only gone up since his time as mayor. And Zohran's explanation for that is, well, I mean, we really classify too many things as rape. Yikes.
And what I think is important to know is a lot of the increase in rape also comes from an expanded definition of what counts as rape, as well as survivors coming forward for acts that took place years prior.
Oh, saying that, well, the reason they're a bunch of, like, they're really, really old rapes. And so yikes. Okay. Best of luck to you on that one. Also, rent is skyrocketing. I know you're shocked about this. I was told that he was going to freeze the rent, and he was going to lower it, and it was going to be amazing, and there were just going to be rainbows shooting out of every single sewer and plumber's butt crack in New York. It was going to be incredible. It just so happens that Manhattan's rent has climbed 8%. Brooklyn's rent has climbed 8% in the median. The Bronx rent has climbed 4.8% since he's taken office. And Queens, 4.3%. The average median rent in Manhattan is $5,300. In Brooklyn, $4,350. That is insane. People are very upset. People happen to be very, very outraged. So where is his focus when he's not watching FIFA? It's on, you guessed it, ICE. Zohran Mamdani is really mad about immigration customs enforcement. So he issued a statement saying that ICE needs to be abolished after, again, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo in Houston tried to drive his vehicle through an immigration customs enforcement agent, and the officer fired in self-defense. So Zohran, up in New York City, decided he had to get out there and call for ICE to be abolished. Okay. And now, again, the exact same story, the exact same stuff with this particular ICE shooting up in Maine. Now we have to get into some of the details with what's going on up there, because there was a riot today. There are protests that are still ongoing, and the footage isn't looking as good for those who are yelling about this. It's the same situation with the Renee Good. And again, right at the initial, it's, oh, they shot and then it's the nicest picture and framing possible. And then it really tilts into, wow, it looks like this individual was trying to kill federal officials by driving right through them. So we're going to get into some of that stuff right here and right now. So the initial Fox News bulletin on this, as individuals were trying to swarm Susan Collins' office, I think probably frames this up better than I could. Here you go.
17 minutes past the hour right now. Anti-ICE protests outside the office of Senator Susan Collins after a deadly shooting in Maine involving an ICE agent. This is Bedford, where the shooting happened about 25 minutes south of Portland. Our correspondent Alexis McAdams is reporting live here in New York City. She's got the latest details on what is happening there. Alexis?
Hey, Sandra. So as you can see here on your screen, this is a live look at what's going on in Maine. We know federal agents are trying to piece together everything that happened as witnesses tell local media that ICE agents surrounded a car and repeatedly ordered the driver to get out. Then seconds later, we're told they heard gunshots, and it was also captured on surveillance video. Listen to this.
Okay. Now, what do we know? What's some of the details built in here? We're going to dive in because, again, everyone is already saying things, and they are very, very unintelligent things. Crystal Ball over at Breaking Points is doing the hyper, super intense analysis. So what's the statement from ICE? Before we begin, let's say what it is the officers on station suggested happened. We're going to look at the footage because we do have some information on that. And then we'll get to the response and some of the outcry. On July 13th, 2026, that would be today, at approximately 7 a.m. Eastern Time, ICE was conducting targeted surveillance on the last known address of an illegal alien with a final order of removal. An illegal alien departed the residence in a vehicle. ICE law enforcement attempted to conduct a vehicle stop. The vehicle attempted to flee the scene, and fearing for public safety, an officer discharged his weapon. The driver of the vehicle was struck, and emergency services were immediately contacted. He passed away from his injuries. The Biddeford Police Department and Federal Bureau of Investigation also responded to the scene. The Department of Homeland Security an investigation unit essentially has been notified, and like all discharge of firearms, this will be investigated. This is a developing situation, and we will update the public when more information is available. Radio crew, we're going to get into some of these details here on the live stream. We do have to send you guys to the commercial, though. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. So we'll get to some of the critiques and all of the tea leaf reading here in a minute. The initial response right afternoon came from Senator Susan Collins of Maine, who again is a moderate Republican. So her initial response, she came out and said, the shooting in Biddeford requires a full and impartial investigation of what happened. It is my understanding that the Biddeford police have secured the site and that the FBI is investigating. There is nothing at all that is wrong with this tweet from anyone, Democrat, Republican. This is what happened. I expect there to be a full investigation because the officers acted with lethal force. That's it. ABC, hesto presto, nothing more, nothing less. Elizabeth Warren, many Democrat senators got out and said, ICE has shot and killed another person. The second death in 2 weeks. This is beyond horrific. ICE is terrorizing our communities, and Republicans in Congress voted to send the rogue agency more blank checks. So that's not what they gave them a budget. They didn't give them blank checks. Know what words mean, Senator. Anyway, enough. The Senate must stop ICE's violence. The Senate can't stop ICE's violence. Even if ICE was being wanton and acting on its own, the Senate has no unilateral authority to act in some super special manner that's going to grant some immediate stopgap. She just wants to sound important. Now, one member of our show's Discord, you can find a link to that in the description, who goes by the moniker Supreme Leader, very kindly sent us a statement by the city of Biddeford from Mayor LaFountain, who got out and said, quote, "This morning, a human life was lost in our city. My thoughts are with the family and the loved ones of the person who died as they face an unimaginable loss. They deserve compassion, dignity, and, in time, a full understanding of the circumstances that led to this tragedy." He said he was shaken to receive the news. He's been in contact with Governor Mills, Senator Collins and King, and Representative Pingree as we seek clear answers and a full accounting of what has occurred. He said he understands there's full cooperation, says we will get answers, but we don't have them yet. I am calling for a full, thorough, and transparent investigation into the fatal incident. And then talks about fear and magnitude, the safety and well-being of every person, etc. What we know about the individuals so far, since this doesn't appear to be a core bit of information that a lot of individuals who are making their statements have an understanding of yet. Let's pull the picture of the car up on the screen. ICE agents were conducting a targeted surveillance at the last known address of an individual with a final order of removal, meaning all of the immigration court cases and things are done, it's over, that's it. And then a man left that location in a vehicle. Agents attempted to stop the vehicle. However, the driver, and this happens every time, because of the individuals who have made it so clear, oh, you got to run away from ICE and they're going to throw you in concentration camps, instead of stopping and saying, hey, I'm a 26-year-old from Colombia, which is the information from Colombia, the nation in South America, and I am here on a work permit. That would have been there. Hesto presto, 1, 2, 3, done. Why are you at this address? What's going on here? Do you know where this individual is? He has a final order of removal. That would have been very, very clearly. Very, very clear and easy to do, I should say. Was this done? No. That's not what occurred because he ran. He ran from cops and then attempted to run over one of the Immigration Customs Enforcement officers. Radio crew, welcome back from your commercial break. What's being shown on the live stream right now is a picture of a Kia that has several holes in the driver's side of the windshield. Now, I'm no forensic expert, but I seem to think that these bullet holes straight clean through the front of the windshield here indicate that the individual who discharged the firearm was standing in front of the vehicle. For the last time, you do not have a right in any way, in any shape, in any form to kill a federal law enforcement officer by driving over them with your car. That is not something that you have the right to do. And given that the individuals, again, as we've seen from the photos down in Texas, as we've seen up in Minnesota, the officers are very clearly wearing police immigration customs enforcement garb. Now, I've said on the show quite clearly and consistently, it is a really bad idea to run around the country fear-mongering that ICE is the Gestapo and they're going to throw you in the concentration camp and all this other crap. Because what is going to happen is it is going to cause individuals to make very stupid, irrational decisions. If you are here legally, you have nothing to fear. But if you flee and then attempt to run over immigration customs enforcement officials, you just might find yourself at the other end of a very severe consequence. Producer Allison over in Indianapolis, I would request here that you have your hand over the dump button because I'm going to roll a clip here of the individuals taking to the street right after the shooting in Biddeford. Hundreds took to the street, middle of the day. Again, just here you go. Blocking traffic, yelling, screaming. Yep. Again, it's in the middle of the... Now, again, could I point out that it's in the middle of the day and none of these individuals happen to have a job? Yes, I could. What's more important to me here, though, is that immediately, as soon as there is anything like this, it is judge, jury, and executioner. It's already decided. It's already decided whether the investigation has happened or not. It is right out here in front of everyone on God's green earth. Now, also, I will point out that our source said that, he's lived in Biddeford for a long time, and he's, looked about a mile away when these protests were occurring. He didn't recognize any of these individuals. He suggested maybe some people were bussed in. I don't have any information regarding that, but the guy who provided for us the statement from the mayor that I didn't have access to, I thought it would at least be worth sharing what his assertion was. Then the protesters became rioters. As usual, here is my standard. If you are out protesting, you are a protester. The minute that those in the crowd violate the law, those individuals, and then the crowd that sticks with, protects, and joins in, the breaking of laws becomes rioters. That does not impart moral value. That doesn't impart ethical constraint. That doesn't impart judgment on whether what they're doing is right or wrong. However, when they stormed Susan Collins' office in Maine, that is the moment to which these individuals became rioters. You can't just break into an office building and run around harassing everyone on the inside. That is, a very, very bizarre situation. So we'll keep an eye on some of these situations as they develop. Before we move, I did want to mention one thing because I brought her up at the beginning. All of the other podcast and media crew are immediately framing this up. So Crystal Ball suggests in response to the Immigration Customs Enforcement statement, quote, ICE doesn't even have a claim that an officer was at risk. They just murdered a man for allegedly trying to flee. He wasn't even the target of their investigation. Okay, 3 quick things. Number 1, you do not have a right to flee law enforcement. That is not a thing you can do. No, it has never been. That is not the case. That's the situation. That's not spinning the point. That is what we know at this present time. Number 2, the bullet holes in the driver's side of the windshield. Right then and there, that's a car heading towards you. You're not exactly snagging shots like that from way over and yonder with no other windows, no other damage to the vehicle. So again, at this individual instance, we're going to see the traffic footage. We're going to see what comes out of it. Getting out there and deciding that already it's super duper murder and an execution situation. No. Now that isn't stopping all of the various Maine wannabe Graham Platner seat takers and representatives for various things running out and trying to get their 15 minutes of fame. So Senate candidate Jordan Wood, he gets out there and he does his little theater.
I want to just start this with the developing story in Biddeford, where we've learned a young person was killed by ICE. We don't know the circumstances around it or the identity, but we do know that it is another incident of violence.
You're doing a great job there, Buster.
In our state. While these details are unknown, what we do know, and what we've known in Maine for the past year, is that ICE, under the Trump administration, is terrorizing our streets. And
our streets, I mean, they were just walking down the street and they're like, oh my gosh, a brown man, get him. No, they were acting on a final order of removal in which an immigration judge said this person has violated federal law. They are given an order of removal. And then a guy walks out of that address. There's no notification. Again, if Maine would send some of these details to federal authorities and say, well, hey, there's someone else that's living in this area now, you would solve a lot of those problems. Case in point, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, Ohio, even Pennsylvania has shared certain levels of details with federal officials to minimize these kinds of misunderstandings. You want to keep individuals safe. Cooperation and coordination in upholding federal law appears to be one of those. Another U.S. Senate candidate also has to get out there and give his 2 cents. He's got a little bit more charisma. I'm shocked to find out there's all of these Senate candidates suddenly coming out of the woodwork. It's Nirav Shah. Here you go.
I want to address the tragedy that unfolded on the streets of Biddeford this morning. Now, details are still emerging.
Then don't hold a press conference. Don't. Details are emerging. Why not just wait for the details?
But we know that an individual lost his life during an encounter involving ICE agents near Poole Street. Presente, Maine has identified the individual as a 26-year-old male who, again, according to Presente, did in fact have a work permit and a social security card. Again, that is per Presente, Maine.
Sounds like he should have stopped and talked to federal law enforcement then. Given the current status and situation, might be a smart thing to have done. Radio crew, we got to send you guys out for this evening. We're going to stick around on the live stream. Lots more news to cover. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
Right now, a family is facing unimaginable grief. A community is in profound shock. And our nation is at pains to understand how a federal operation escalated to a fatal force at a local Main street. I just am coming from Biddeford, from a community action at Mechanics Park, and there are a lot of folks who are scrambling for answers right now. What I think everyone shares is that this should never happen. Not in Biddeford, not in Houston, as it did last week, not in Minneapolis, not in America, and certainly not in 2026. And of course, definitely not at the hands of ICE.
They're definitely not. They're going to continue until we see repetition that involves the active terror that we've seen over the last couple of years. Now, the argument is that this is somehow going to make Republicans all look bad. We've seen this with like the mass shootings in the past, and the idea that if you just say Republicans are responsible for this, then that means voters will go, oh my gosh, Republicans just want to kill children. No, that's not how voters are going to see it. We've never seen that in an election. That's what they're trying to do. That is what these individuals who are getting out holding press conferences with their "I'm running for office" stuff behind them, that's what they're attempting. That's the move. It is all to gain attention. That's the whole point. And by the way, is that actually going to move the needle for people in Maine? It's very doubtful. It is truly doubtful. We'll have to see. There are a couple of other details coming out of the Senate and out of the actors. The representatives of Congress, I should say. I want to dive into some of these details here with you on the Tony Kinnett Cast. The death of Senator Lindsey Graham over the weekend. See if we can pivot over to this real quick while we're keeping an eye on a couple of other details here. So Lindsey Graham, again, senator from South Carolina. Over the weekend, we got word Saturday night, early Sunday morning, that he died at age 71 from a, quote, brief and sudden illness per his initial statement. Emergency responders were called to his Capitol Hill home for cardiac arrest. The preliminary DC medical examiner findings, aortic dissection due to arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Essentially, he had an aorta rupture from hardened arteries. Now, his father had passed away from a heart attack at about the same age. Prior to his death, he just returned from a visit to Kiev, Ukraine, meeting Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday. Now, immediately after this, there were a lot of people with very, very, very strong feelings that came out to say all different kinds of things. Rest in peace. A lot of people said, I'm very, very, very glad that he's dead and he's burning in hell and all of this other stuff. My standard here on the Tony Kinnett Cast is that we are not going to engage in any of that. I'm not going to use this time to go into the history of Lindsey Graham and his politics and whether he was the most war hawk that ever lived, or whether he, whatever. I'm not here to do that. What I do want to make it clear is two things. Number one, that he was, in fact, a colonel in the United States military. And for that reason alone, I'm not going to take this time to go after him and rake him down any coals, whether or not I disagreed with him. And having met him twice, there was one point where I did argue with him a little bit, kind of a 15-minute conversation about some policy, and he was very gracious about it. Does that mean that he's, everyone wants to come out and give you their 2 cents on the guy? That's not what I'm here to do. So let's talk about who is going to replace him in the Senate. That would be, according to the wishes of President Trump and the announcement of Governor Henry McMaster of South Carolina, that would be his sister, Darlene Graham Nordone. And I think that we have that statement from the governor ready to go here. I believe we do, yes. I want to make sure I pull that up. I know that we have his sister's statement. Maybe we can air his sister's statement first here.
I want to thank the governor for selecting me to serve the remainder of Lindsey's term. It is such an honor. Lindsey has always been there for me, and now I will be there for him. My brother was the most amazing person, outstanding leader, and just a genuinely good man. He was kind and considerate and loved by his family dearly. As I think everyone would agree, Lindsey worked harder than anyone. He worked nonstop to make our state, country, and world better.
Now, again, I've seen some individuals like fact-checking her statement by statement. I don't think that's necessary. This is a grieving sister. By the way, again, I'm sure a lot of you have heard this bio yet. But he essentially ended up raising his sister. He was born on July 9th, 1955 in South Carolina. His family ran a bar and restaurant where they lived in one back room. He was the first in his family to attend college. He earned undergraduate and law degrees from the University of South Carolina, served as a JAG officer in the Air Force, and then retired as a colonel. He served in the U.S. House from 95 to 03, and then in the U.S. Senate from 03 until his death. So again, his sister, I absolutely expect to issue a kind eulogy for the man and graciously accept the appointment by Governor McMaster at the recommendation of President Trump.
He loved his family and loved serving this state and our country. He dedicated his life to our country. It is such a privilege to get to finish some of his important work, and I promise to work hard over the next several months to support the president and carry forward the efforts of my brother on behalf of the citizens of South Carolina and the United States. I know Lindsey thought the world of his staff and colleagues, and with their support, I feel confident. I think this is what Lindsey would have wanted, and I plan to honor him in this way.
All right, so I do want to make it clear, what are the rules now? The filing period for because again, Graham had won his primary. Now, looking at the filing period to replace Senator Graham in this election, the filing period opens on July 21st. That's the second Tuesday after his death. That filing period closes on July 28th, so that's a 7-day window. There will be a special primary election on August 11th, and then runoff if necessary, because you have to win a plurality or a majority of the votes here. Excuse me, not just the largest percentage. Runoff if necessary, August 25th. So those appear to be the rules based on the 2025 South Carolina Code of Laws in Title VII. Now, very, very quickly here, I want to talk about two things post his death. Number one, I want to talk about the anchor point that this is likely going to be used as. And then I want to talk very briefly about, for example, what a lot of people have been posting out about, just very, very quickly. I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about some of those details. President Trump did make it pretty clear that he wanted, or that he had spoken with Senator Lindsey Graham over the weekend, and that kind of as a final message, Lindsey Graham echoed support for the Save America Act.
Well, I think they're a little cuckoo.
Excuse me, wait a minute. That's the Hugh Hewitt Trump clip. Do we have the president making that statement here? We might not, and I apologize. That would be my fault. I may have saved over that particular clip, and I apologize. So the president has talked about the Save America Act being the next step that he wants to, to move forward here with. This is true. Senator Lindsey Graham was very pro the Save America Act, especially its provisions on election security. This has very much upset a lot of Democrats. There are a lot of individuals now, for example, like Senator Elisa Slotkin of Michigan, that are now claiming that the Save America Act is the ultimate threat, and then without the Save America Act, Democrats are never going to be able to win an election ever again. And there's an argument to be made that it is the Save America Act and Lindsey Graham's death that could be a flotation device to get it through the Senate as a memorial to Senator Lindsey Graham, something that might move the hearts of Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Tom Tillis. We'll talk about Mitch McConnell here in a second. Here you go.
The other thing that we blocked yesterday was the SAVE Act, right? Which was literally allow this administration to rig our democracy so that it would be hard for any Democrat in any state to win any election, and disenfranchise all married women in the meantime, by the way.
Again, no, not even close. Not even a lot of left-wing publications are allowing that kind of a citation to go forward. It's just a strange decision. And again, I do have from the President of the United States, or I think it's a CBS morning clip, making it very clear that at least for his administration, that there was a lot of concern on behalf of Lindsey Graham to get through not only a lot of national security measures that he was more famous for, but also that it was important for Lindsey Graham, again, on the election security measures in the United States. Now, before we move on, before we get into some of the conspiracy style stuff, I do want to see if we can, kind of cut this from the President of the United States here. Not exactly the most friendly of clips here, but I think that it's important to throw up here.
What makes it even stranger is that I got a call last night sometime at, the early evening, maybe in the 7s, and he called and he said, we're all set for the Save America Act. He was pushing the Save America Act like crazy. He got back, said he just landed from Ukraine. I said, that's a long trip to make. He said he sounded a little tired, but perfect, but a little bit tired. Had a right to be. And he was a worker. No, he was really a worker, but...
So again, the President of the United States kind of going into a little bit of detail. Sorry, it took me a second to find that particular clip. The President of the United States going into detail on that effort. Do I think that this will be enough to kind of push some of this stuff through? I think it does have an opportunity to perhaps convince some of the members on the more establishment side of the Senate. Now, speaking of that establishment side of the Senate, Mitch McConnell has now posted a clip of him in a hospital bed next to his wife. I'm hearing accusations that this is AI, and Laura Loomer says he's brain dead, and there's pictures of him and he just looks like he's in a teal bag with a tube. At this point, I do not have a lot of information on whether or not Mitch McConnell is, running around doing cartwheels in the hospital, or whether his wife is brokering some type of backroom deal with China. I just don't see that as necessary for this point of speculation with y'all. Now, again, this is why I believe it is incredibly important for those who are in office not to run for a lot of terms. And when you start to get up to a certain age in which you have a family history of medical issues, it might be time to step down instead of running for re-election. That's not to blame anyone in any way, shape, or form. Bad health can get anybody. But when you are playing with power in the United States Senate, the most austere body of the legislature, the most powerful body of the legislature, one might make the case that there is a little bit more that is required on your recognition of what certain things do for your health and the office and the country as a whole. So the last thing I wanted to mention before we hopped off of this particular thing is there were a lot of individuals right after Lindsey Graham died who came out and the conspiracy theories were afoot. This was really obnoxious. Who said, oh man, he was poisoned by Ukraine, or he was poisoned by Russia, or he was poisoned or assassinated by the Iranians, or I'm really tired of this stuff. where we're just looking at circumstance and we're saying that suspicion equals proof of something happening. I think it's really ridiculous. And I really get annoyed that people are scouring social media to be the very, very first one to get some kind of a statement out or some kind of a point out. So as a quick refresher, here is my standard on the Tony Kinnett Cast for my team that I require all of my crew to follow. Number one, we are extremely transparent with you guys, even when I can't find a clip and why. Because if I'm transparent with y'all, then hopefully you guys will be a little more understanding when I make mistakes. Number two, we try very, very hard not to make mistakes because we find it less important to be the very first one right there to the news story. We like to analyze the data and tell you what we do and don't know about something so that you don't have to go back and go, oh man, should I listen to Tony anymore? Should I watch him? Because he gets a ton of things wrong. One thing that we can confirm is that right now, there are still explosions that are currently ongoing in Iran. Several strikes are ongoing. A series in Bushehr, Iran, for example, between 3:28 and 3:30 a.m. local time. That was just confirmed at the top of the hour that those explosions were ongoing. Now, that brings us to the President of the United States and his planned address on Thursday. So President Trump has announced he's going to get out in front of the country and he's going to do a big, huge address at, I think, 9 p.m. or something similar on Thursday. And it's, again, a lot of speculation. Is it President Trump's going to get out and talk about Iran? Is he going to expand some strikes and talk about how the United States is doing this, that, and the other? Is he going to talk about the replacement for Senator Lindsey Graham being his sister? Is he going to talk about perhaps some of the ICE situation in Maine? There appears to be a third option. So Matt Foldy over at the Washington Reporter, which was the very first outlet, by the way, to call that Graham Platner was getting ready to step down, he says today at just before 5 p.m., quote, President Trump is planning to announce that Georgia's two senators, Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, are illegitimate because of fraud. That's according to what the Washington Reporter calls a, quote, well-placed source in Georgia, end quote. Now, I do not believe that in the midterm year that throwing a ton of scorn on Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, as opposed, in the context of a fraud case, is really the move. It could be, again, it depends. I hear a lot of reports like these, again, not to disparage Matthew Foldy's reporting, he's an excellent guy, but do I think that in a midterm year, the president's getting ready to get out there and announce that there are two senators from Georgia that are fraudulent? Not necessarily. I think that Ossoff has enough foibles of his own and is also trying to maintain popularity. The polls are in a wild state right now because realistically, Republicans in the House and the Senate just have to sit there and do nothing. Again, as you have Democrats in the House and the Senate that are involved in every single kind of scandal that you can possibly fathom. If the president of the United States gets in front of the country and talks about some of these scandals, it's kind of golden. If the president of the United States is able to announce by Thursday that there has been some significant change regarding the Strait of Hormuz, and so the United States owns it, announces some type of broker deal in which the rest of the Gulf states are funding something or working in some kind of tandem, that would be useful. But whether or not the president of the United States is going to do some type of huge scripted or kind of like off-the-cuff thing, it's also really unclear whether or not that's going to move the dial. We haven't really seen an address from the president of the United States take a major shift in some way or another. I just don't see that. Now, there are a couple of things the president could address. There are still several states that are trying to do some very, very weird things on a local policy level. So we've seen this with Virginia. Governor Abigail Spanberger has attempted to completely ban all federally recognized Second Amendment firearms like the AR-15 in Virginia. Now, there's currently an injunction banning any law enforcement from enforcing that ban, but you've got Zohran Mamdani in New York City who's trying to close Rikers. You've got California, which is just a mess. And then, of course, you've got Colorado at it again once more, trying to silence free speech. So in Colorado, a state law forces businesses to refer to some customers with inaccurate pronouns, even if using them would violate the business owner's religious beliefs or conscience. We're back at the cake nonsense. We're right back here yet again. Clearly, it's a violation of free speech. But as Colorado has proved time and time again, it's got little concern for the First Amendment. That's one of the reasons why we're very proud to be sponsored by the Alliance Defending Freedom, who's challenging the law on behalf of a Christian bookstore and a sports apparel company, but a court, once again, recently ruled against them. Now, with the Alliance Defending Freedom's help, these two businesses have appealed, and they'll likely continue fighting to ensure Colorado doesn't get away with this attempt to skirt the First Amendment. There's a pretty good chance that this ends up in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. So highly recommend a gift over to the ADF. Your gift helps protect free speech in cases like this all over the country. For a limited time, your first gift to the ADF is doubled by a special matching grant while funds last. Text TONY to 83848 or go to joinadf.com/Tony to have your gift doubled. Okay, last but certainly not least here today on the show, there were just a couple of mail time questions. Just a few that I wanted a bit of a chance to answer before we're done for this wonderful Monday evening of chaos and excitement and, well, heartburn. So over on the Discord side of the channel, you can find the link to that in the description. There's a mail time channel where I can, dive into a couple of things here and give you some answers. It's an easy way for us to go through these kinds of things. So from Lisa, is there any further recourse on Judge Dugan in Minnesota? I thought this was in Milwaukee, but either way, Judge Dugan only getting a fine for the felony, very, very unlikely. Once a judge has allowed a sentencing to go forward, very unlikely you're going to see some kind of appeal. And the Judge Dugan, who again helped an illegal immigrant evade federal law enforcement in the courthouse, it's very unlikely once the sentence has been given. That's kind of the the set it is. From Hal 9004, do you think that this is the time for the Trump administration to go after infrastructure like power plants in Iran? Maybe. I don't think that's necessarily unlikely. The problem with power plants, though, is once you destroy them, you have to rebuild them. And a power plant is not exactly like slapping something up in a video game. That takes time and some dedication and some very specific engineering to accomplish. And so I think the Trump administration, who wants a different regime to be in power, even in a balkanization state, you often don't see all of the power plants destroyed because that's how the lights are on and the communications stay open. So I don't think that's necessarily, is it an option for Trump to do? Yes. Do I think that he's going to go forward with it? Probably not likely. Now, do I currently see kind of a pattern in President Trump saying that the memorandum of understanding was just a test run? Do I actually think the President of the United States was using the MOU as a test? No, I don't. President Trump said that the MOU was he was testing Iran. I don't think so. I think the President of the United States was testing Vice President J.D. Vance. I think because that's when Peter Doocy of Fox suggested it to him and said, Mr. President, are you going to take credit for the MOU if it goes successfully? And if not, are you going to blame it on J.D. Vance? And the president kind of cocked his head back and said, yeah, that sounds like a kind of decent idea. Thanks, Peter. That kind of a thing. I think that the whole diplomacy thing, amid all of the assassination attempts and whatnot, yeah, I'm just not seeing right here and now any case with the United States that the president is. I think this is a point of no turning back. I think once you take the Strait of Hormuz, it's either you got to finish the job or it's over. And the socialists are finding a similar thing. That's why the thumbnail of the video tonight is no turning back. Because everyone is in a situation right now where they have doubled down. The Democratic Socialists, they're here. They've taken the mask off. They're like, kill the Senate, get rid of the Supreme Court, pack the House, that kind of a thing, run everything through mob rule in the House, have them appoint a president and abolish ICE and police. That's the DSA. That's where they're going with. They can't back up from this now. And so they are going to have to own a few things or they're really going to try not to. In the same way, the Trump administration, they have thrown the dice on the gamble. And I've had some questions that I've said on the show quite a bit that at the end of quarter two, I'm going to have a lot better feeling for how the midterms are going to go. We're now in Q3. The end of Q2 was 13 days ago. So what is my take on how things are going in the midterm? Economically, not bad. Not as bad as it was predicted. Not as good as it was predicted. We have to wait and see. And I think that the waiting and seeing is on whether or not the Iranian situation, if that ends with a resounding super duper victory, and you see out of some twist of fate, the crown prince or someone else coming in to set up a government in Iran or the country balkanize and fracture, that'll be a pretty huge midterm victory for the United States. The Democrats, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, will try to turn around and say, oh, but it was really expensive. I don't think that'll fly. Does it kind of rest on that at this point? Yes. There's just no turning back. Did Russia send their doomsday plane to Iran? Your super chat question. I haven't seen a whole lot about a doomsday plane being sent to Iran other than some kind of rumor mongering social media stuff. It's a Russian Tu-214 PU. I don't know, guys. A lot of the accounts and things that are reporting this are really spurious and have also deleted a lot of their statements. I think there are a lot of people trying to suggest as a last-ditch effort that Russia's going to nuke everyone, but Russia has now threatened to nuke the rest of the country like 815 times. There's a meme from, of all things, the cartoon Jimmy Neutron, in which the teacher goes, Sheen, and then says, you've attempted to show Ultralord in the show and tell now 15 weeks in a row. Like, this is the same thing. Like, how many times, and this is the same with the Trump thing, when you're going to say, there's a deal, they want to make a deal, and then we're back at the same thing on Monday, people are like, I don't really care anymore. The stock market, we found that out. The stock market stopped caring. And as soon as the rest of the world said, all right, well, we're not using the Strait of Hormuz anymore. All right, route oil and gas tankers through the Gulf of America to Louisiana, Alabama, and Texas. And also the other side of the Arabian Peninsula. Yeah, you got some differences. You know, some things changed in kind of a long-term fashion, which is a geopolitical win for the president of the United States. From Holstein, Tony, do you have any particular rationale for saying the word, quote, anywho instead of anyhow? And if not, we love you anyways. So as a very jaded Hoosier and millennial, I often will choose to say things either incorrectly because I grew up on kind of, 90s and aughts sitcom culture. For example, there was someone who was really aggravated that I mispronounced the French city of Calais. I do know, in fact, that it is pronounced Calais, but I called it Calais because I know that it upsets the French, and I think it's funny because things that upset the French are funny. But anywho, why do I say anywho instead of anyhow? I don't know. I'm sure there's people who just says, anywho, and just keep on moving. Don't look too much into it. I'm not going to give you the precise grammatical, impressively on-point style of Britannica literature here in my news broadcasting. That's just kind of more of me just being transparent and normal. Steve says the Iranians are claiming that they're winning the conflict. Of course they are. He said, I was under the impression that when your supply chain includes heavy earth-moving equipment to dig munitions out that might still work out of rebel piles, you're not winning. Did I skip a chapter of von Clausewitz on war? I mean, Islamic nations aren't honest. If they can convince people here in the United States, like the retard Joe Kent, that, they're actually winning the war. No, they're not. No one actually believes that. The question is whether the United States can actually pull away a victory or it just says, all right, we beat the crap out of you. We're just going to leave you here kind of bleeding by the fence. That's going to be the true point here. Salt and Light has a $13 Canadian super chat, or $14 says, by being patient and taking his time in these negotiations, President Trump has exposed the Islamists for who they are and now has the moral authority to escalate and take the oil. Okay, that is a good point. I wholly disagree with it, and here's why. Everyone has already known who the Islamic people of the Iranian regime are. We've been known. We've been known since the days of Ahmadinejad. We have known for the 47, 48 years of the Islamic regime. Since they told Hezbollah to kill United States Marines, we have known exactly who they are. We have. I'm serious. If there is anyone at all out there who is like, I don't really know a whole lot here, and then they see Trump doing like the MOU thing, and they're like, oh, maybe this is going to work, and then all of a sudden, Iran betrays us. Oh, no, shocker. I was not expecting this. It's like, he's now showed the world who they are. There is not a single person on this entire planet who is convinced, who didn't already know. Not a single person. If you can find me this person, I'll take it all back. And not just in the, I believed that. No. I need to find this person who had no idea who the Iranians were. That's not a thing. Very, very kind super chat, and we thank you for it. But no. There was no... Who are we convincing here? Because if I remember correctly, the whole Tucker Carlson-esque crew had already decided that Islam was super duper wonderful and amazing, and that Americans and Christians were the true evil. And then, of course, the Jews and that kind of thing. No, and everyone knows that the Islamists are gaslighting liars. I mean, come on. Lynn Blackledge, thank you very kindly for the $10 super chat. Now, then, if this is the case, then why did Trump try to negotiate? Because there's a lot of State Department isolationist-y people who genuinely George Bushian style think that in the heart of every person, there's something that yearns for freedom. That's not true. There are people out there who, raised in a certain culture, just want you dead. That's just the truth. I've seen these people to my face who have spit in my face and told me point blank to my face in very poor English that they wanted to kill me, abuse my wife and family, and essentially piss on the ashes. And a couple of minutes later, when they were no longer on this earth, did I feel a whole lot of, man, maybe we could have convinced them. By the way, if you actually want my criticisms of the government of Israel, it's this. The Israel secularist kind of position of the government, the actual people say, well, I know the right wing of Israel. What does the left wing of Israel want? And I argued with them about this, like the foreign minister and I argued in the King David Hotel about this. It was a very good evening. I might play some of the clip of that sometime. The Israeli government and a lot of Israeli culture believes that if they just educate people enough, like if you just show people enough horrifying scenes from the Holocaust Museum and the October 7th museum that they built over there, it's a phenomenal exhibit. It's one of the most incredible museum exhibits of all time. They even, the whole Teddy Roosevelt AI thing that Trump talked to, the model for that was on some old philosopher. I can't remember the philosopher. It may have been Solomon, now that I think about it, or Maimonides. Anyway, one of those two. There was one of those in Israel. They were trying out the AI person you could talk to. The idea behind this is that if you just educate people enough, that'll give them morals. Nope. No, that's not a thing. There are a lot of really highly educated people that are deeply evil. And there are a lot of really stupid, uneducated, what the academics would call dumb bum hicks that are far more moral, ethical, sweet, wonderful people than many of the academic class. Your amount of education is not a measure of your morality. And if you just show people enough photos of the bad things happening, that'll make them like us, won't it? No. There are people who, because of their cultures and what they believe, hate you. Truly, deeply, inherently. This is one of the reasons why it is so important that we pay attention to the Palestinians, for example, raising their children to watch cartoons in which the entire premise of the show is just to kill Jews and Christians. You say, Tony, that's not how it works. I have been over there. I have seen it myself. These people have said these things to me. And every single soldier who has actually been in the sandbox, every single mercenary, every single member of a PMC who has been over there knows exactly what I am talking about. And that is one of the reasons why when you ask someone like Joe Kent, or you would ask Graham Platner about it, he'd go, well, actually, and he wouldn't actually have an answer. So, and by the way, the Eastern governments of Russia and China are also of that same ilk. And like the whole, no, President Xi is your friend. Putin is actually your friend. Nope. Don't be retarded. Don't be dumb. You don't have to be dumb. You don't have to, by the way, that doesn't mean you have to love Ukraine. That doesn't mean you have to love Taiwan. Doesn't mean you have to love anybody. But the idea that like there's actually a big, huge op to get you to hate people. My brother in Christ, we have the videos. We have the receipts. They're here. CVS prints them. We put them on X. They are out in front of everybody. So, those things all said, hopefully, we'll take one last one here because it's almost 8:30. Oh my goodness, a very, very kind individual bringing up here from a question and then a quick clarification here from on the evening of really interesting nicknames from Nutsmasher. Says, what's preventing the U.S. from seizing the oil tankers that left the Strait last month when Trump waived the sanctions? So on the high seas, en route to China, pretty much nothing. Now, in the meantime, some of those Iranian vehicles are flagged with other countries like China. Stealing Chinese tankers is a bit more of a risky maneuver. Now, will it eventually have to be dealt with? Sure. They're currently prodding the north of the Philippines. That's not going to go very well. But also, China's riddled with debt and its infrastructure is collapsing. Oh, Brian Ledbetter, thank you very kindly for the $10 super chat. You guys do not need to do that. Now, last and not least here, want to make sure that I get this last little thing. You were listing the rent percentages in New York, but I think that you missed one. Didn't Zorro, I'm guessing that's a reference to Zohran Mamdani, give himself an 18% pay raise after less than a year in office? Probably. I don't know. I think that like the giving people a raises kind of thing, I don't think it's great. I never think that it's quite the zinger because they'll just say that someone else actually tried to give him a raise and they had nothing to do with it. Wink. So that particular side of things, you know, why steal tankers when you can steal the source? We might talk a little bit more about the Karg Island and the island strategy of the United States here pretty soon. Oh, producer Daniel's telling me, yeah, Zohran did in fact give himself that raise. Interesting indeed. All right. I think we've gotten all of the mail time, and I think we've gotten the super chats answered as well. What do I think of the 357 Magnums that Turkey gave world leaders when they came in? I love that. To answer that question, I think that's pretty freaking sweet. I hate Turkey as a government. But would I turn my nose up at a 357 Magnum? My dad had a 357 Magnum when I was a kid. Still does. Thing's the coolest pistol ever. Thing's awesome. It's neat. I love 357 Magnums. I think they're really cool. I'll take one negative question because I think they're funny. From Mongo606, why doesn't ICE all have body cams? What are you people afraid of? Republicans in the House and Senate tried to fund ICE body cameras. They literally tried to fund it over the last several months, and Democrats in the Senate blocked it. That was that whole government shutdown thing. That was what that was about. Republicans were like, okay, sure, body cams, because that always goes really well. Now they're ordering the body cameras. But I don't know if you know this, but just because you order something, that doesn't mean that they just magically appear in all the infrastructure to catalog the servers, the everything else. So that kind of stuff aside, I hope that we got a little bit extra, some good times, some fun here this evening. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. We'll be back tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you guys haven't subscribed, subscribe. Come on. If you hate me, subscribe anyway. And you can tell me how much you think I'm a discount Temu JD Vance every single night. It won't hurt my feelings. Maybe it will. You'll have to subscribe and find out. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.